Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Janavalabha Girivardhari
Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari
Jai Gopi Janavalabha
Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Shri Radha Govinda ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Stotra Sata Shri Śrīmad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Stotra Sata Shri Śrīmad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai Grantaraj Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai Samveda Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Radha. So, today we're reading from Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 11 of Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam. think Prabhupada spoke on it, I guess.
Well, that was the verse.
I'm not sure. 'Cause I mean, Haribalas Prabhu just said 11, but I'm guessing. I mean, I could read yesterday's English just so we're all up with it. But yeah, I guess Prabhupada spoke on 2:17.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Maybe that's possible.
Yeah, I'll read the text in purport and then we'll chant 11. So 2:17 says, "The Lord appeared as the son of Sudevi, the wife of King Nabhi, and was known as Rishabdev. He performed materialistic yoga to equibalance the mind. This stage is also accepted as the highest perfectional situation of liberation, wherein one is situated in oneself and is completely satisfied." Purport. Out of many types of mystic performances for self-realization, the process of Jada Yoga is also one accepted by authorities. This Jada Yoga involves practicing becoming like a dumb stone and not being affected by material reactions. Just as a stone is indifferent to all kinds of attacks and reattacks of external situations, similarly, one practices Jada Yoga by tolerating voluntary infliction of pain upon the material body. Such yogis, out of many self-infliction methods, practice plucking out the hairs on their heads without shaving and without any instrumental help. Wow. But the real purpose of such Jada Yoga practice is to get free from all material affection and to be completely situated in the self. At the last stage of his life, Emperor Rishabdev wandered like a dumb madman, unaffected by all kinds of bodily mistreatment. Seeing him like a madman wandering naked with long hair and a long beard, less intelligent children and men in the street used to spit on him and urinate on his body. He used to lie in his own stool and never move, but the stool of his body was fragrant like the smell of flowers. And a saintly person would recognize him as a Paramahamsa, one in the highest stage of human perfection. One who is not able to make his stool fragrant should not, however, imitate Emperor Rishabdev. The practice of Jada Yoga was possible for Rishabdev and others on the same level of perfection, but such an uncommon practice is impossible for an ordinary man. The real purpose of Jada Yoga, as mentioned here in this verse, is prasanta karana, or subduing the senses. The whole process of yoga, under whatever heading it may be, is to control the unbridled material senses and thus prepare oneself for self-realization. In this age specifically, this Jada Yoga cannot be of any practical value. But on the other hand, the practice of Bhakti Yoga is feasible because it is just suitable for this age. The simple method of hearing from the right source, Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, will lead one to the highest perfectional stage of yoga. Rishabdev was the son of King Nabhi and the grandson of King Agnidhra, and he was the father of King Bharat, after whose name this planet Earth was called Bharatvarsha. Rishabdev's mother was also known as Meru Devi, although her name is mentioned here as Sudevi. It is sometimes proposed that Sudevi was another wife of King Nabhi, but since King Rishabdev is mentioned elsewhere as the son of Meru Devi, it is clear that Meru Devi and Sudevi are the same person under different names. So that was text 10, so now we'll chant text 11. Satre mamam sa bhagavan hayasir asato.
Satre mamam sa bhagavan hayashir asato.
Shakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varnaha.
Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma.
Vacho babhuvur usati svashvatosya nasta.
Vacho babhuvur usati svasatosya nastha.
Satre mamam sa bhagavan hayasir asato.
Satre mamamsa bhagavan hayashira shato.
Shakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna.
Sakshat yagya purushastapaniya varna.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma.
Vacho babhuvurusati svashvatosya nasta.
Vacho bhavu ushati svasvatosya nasta.
Please chant.
Satre mamamsa bhagavan hayashira shato.
Satre mamamsa bhagavan hayasira sato.
Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna.
Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma.
Vacho bhabhuvur usati svasatosya nastaha.
Vacho babhuvurusati svashvatosya nasta. Satre mamasa bhagavan hayasira shato. Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna. Chando mayo
Makamayo
kila devatatma.
Vacho bhabhuvur usati svasvatosya nastaha. Satre mamamsa bhagavan hayashira shato. Shakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna. Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma. Vacho bhabhuvur ushati svasvatosya nashta. Satre mamamsa bhagavan hayashira shakto. Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna. Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma. Vacho bhabhuvur ushati svasatosya nasta.
Anybody else?
Satre mamamsa
Bhagavan hayashira sato. Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya varna.
Chando mayo makamayo kila devatatma. Vacho bhabhuvur ushati svasvatosya nasta. Satre mamamsa bhagavan hayashira shato. Sakshat sayagya purushastapaniya Vacho bhabhu usati svasasosyanasta.
So, word for word, Shatre
Shatre
in the sacrificial ceremony,
in the sacrificial ceremony.
Mama
Mama
of mine, Asa
asa
appeared,
appeared.
Bhagavan,
Bhagavan,
the personality of Godhead,
the personality of God.
Hayashirsha
Hayashir
with his horse-like head,
his horse-like.
Ata
Atha,
thus, Shakshad
Sakha,
directly,
directly.
Saha
Saha,
he, Yagya Purushaha the person who is pleased by performances of sacrifice,
the person who is pleased by performance of sacrifice.
Tapaniya
Tapaniya,
golden,
gold.
Varnaha
Varna,
hue, Chandamaya
Chandamaya,
personified Vedic hymns,
personified Vedic hymns.
Makamaya
Makamaya,
personified sacrifices,
personified sacrifice.
Akila
Akila,
all that be,
all the
Devata Atma
Devata Atma,
the soul of the demigods,
the soul of the demigod.
Vachaha
Vajra,
sounds, Babuvuhu
Babhuvahu,
become audible,
become honorable.
Usatihi
Ushatihi,
very pleasing to hear,
very pleasing to you.
Svasataha
Svasataha,
while breathing,
breathing.
Asya
Tasya,
his, Nashtaha through the nostrils.
through the nostrils.
Translation: the Lord appeared as the Hayagriva incarnation in a sacrifice performed by me, Brahma. And he is the personified sacrifices, and the hue of his body is golden. He is the personified Vedas as well, and the super soul of all demigods. When he breathed, all the sweet sounds of the Vedic hymns came out of his nostrils. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Vedic hymns are generally meant for sacrifices performed by fruitive workers who also want to satisfy the demigods to achieve their fruitive result. But the Lord is the personified sacrifices and personified Vedic hymns. Therefore, one who is directly a devotee of the Lord is a person who has automatically both served the purposes of sacrifices and pleased the demigods. The devotees of the Lord may not perform any sacrifice or may not please the demigods as per Vedic injunctions, and still the devotees are on a higher level than the fruitive workers or the worshippers of different demigods. Om Agyantamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Mukam Karti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaeva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, this chapter that we're reading now is all of the scheduled incarnations, avatars of Krishna, and explaining what purposes they come for, how they appear, what they look like, all these sorts of things. And yeah, each one has a specific purpose of their incarnation. So I just thought I'd quickly read a little description Prabhupada gives of Hayagriva, what his purpose was, and like a little bit about what he did. in the Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's also interesting, there's a demon named Hayagriva, which is obviously not the same as Vishnu Hayagriva, this demon stole the Vedas. Or he wanted to take the Vedic knowledge away from Brahma at the time of annihilation. And Krishna, or Vishnu, then took the incarnation, Matsya, and saved them. So this is obviously not the same. So Prabhupada says that there's three purports that I'll read. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 8:24-57. At the end of the last inundation, which was during the period of Swayambhuva Manu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead killed the demon named Hayagriva and delivered all the Vedic literatures to Lord Brahma when Lord Brahma awakened from sleeping. So this is one of his main purposes, is to redeliver the Vedic literatures to Brahma, because as is explained in the next two purports, they were stolen by a demon. So Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 5:18 summary, Prabhupada says, at the end of each kalpa, when the demon Ajnana steals the Vedic knowledge, Lord Hayagriva appears and preserves it. Then he delivers it to Lord Brahma. At the end of the millennium, ignorance personified assumed the form of a demon, stole all the Vedas and took them down to the planet of Rasatala. The Supreme Lord, however, in his form of Hayagriva, retrieved the Vedas and returned them to Lord Brahma when he begged for them. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord, whose determination never fails. And then there's another little purport from Bhagavatam 5:16-6. At the end of the millennium, ignorance personified assumed the form of a demon, stole the Vedas and took them down. Oh, sorry, that's the same, but then the next is the purport. Although Vedic knowledge is imperishable, within this material world it is sometimes manifest and sometimes not. When the people of this material world become too absorbed in ignorance, the Vedic knowledge disappears. Lord Hayagriva, or Lord Matsya, however, always protects the Vedic knowledge, and in due course of time it is again distributed through the medium of Lord Brahma. Brahma is the trustworthy representative of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, when he again asked for the treasure of Vedic knowledge, the Lord fulfilled his desire. So that's a little backstory about the incarnation of Lord Hayagriva. So it's interesting what Prabhupada says in this purport, that sometimes the Vedic knowledge is manifest and sometimes it's not manifest, because people, general populace, becomes too covered over by ignorance. So it becomes taken away. But yeah, we understand the Vedas, they're eternally manifest. It's not, they don't come from Lord Brahma, but they're entrusted to him for dissemination to those that are deserving, so that they may understand, ultimate goal of life, how to live properly in this world as ordained by Krishna in the Vedas, and ultimately how to become free from the material world, how to go back to the spiritual world. So Brahma is, Prabhupada says, the trustworthy representative. And Hayagriva, being compassionate upon him, went to the hellish planets and retrieved all of this Vedic wisdom, so that the future beings in the universe and Lord Brahma himself also wouldn't be bewildered. Because without the Vedic knowledge, we're kind of like, groping in the dark as to what to do. So, that's a nice little description. So back to the Bhagavatam purport. It's discussing the Prabhupada's kind of contrasting the difference between karma, kanda, vidhi, or persons who want to enjoy furtive results and like sense gratification, liberation, even dharma, artha, kama, moksha. They want to enjoy all the things in the material world and reduce all the suffering. So it's kind of like in an imbalanced scale. You can't just have one without the other. There's always got to be a balance by nature's law. And then ultimately, when karma kandis become frustrated because they can't enjoy the senses, they can't, achieve that everlasting bliss of being in the heavenly planets and enjoying. And then they become frustrated, and then they want, okay, now I want moksha, now I want liberation. So become free of all this entanglement, all this suffering. So it's accepting and rejecting, this base function of the materialistic and material desires. We hanker, and then when we get it, it's not what we want, and we think, reject everything and get free from it. So, in Karma Kanda, the means of worship and the goal of worship are different. For example, they, will perform different sacrifices, follow different austerities, things like that. Perform different ceremonies for the purpose of gaining pious credits. They may go to the heavenly planets, enjoy, or they may attain the post of Indra, or attain all these different things. So they're worshipping a particular demigod for doing this. But the goal is not that they want to please that demigod. The goal is not that they will continue worshipping that demigod or that personality. But the goal is that it's selfish, the enjoyment. The goal is that I'm worshipping you so that you'll give me, this benefit, this desired result. But, if you don't give it, then I'm not going to worship you, basically, is the implication. Because it's based on on the fulfillment of one's own desires. So, the desire is to enjoy as much as possible and counteract impious activities so that one can continue to enjoy. And we see where this backfires, like with, what's his name, Vraja-mohana, right? The demonic personality who was worshipping Lord Shiva. And he was, showing such intense devotion, he wanted to offer his head into the fire. Eventually, after he had been offering different parts of his body, because this is the nature of the demons. They're very twisted intelligence or twisted mentality. So he was offering his flesh into the fire, and wanting Lord Shiva to appear before him so he could grant him a boon. And he was becoming desperate, and so then he was going to cut his own head off and offer it into the fire, which is a pretty intense offering. I don't think any of us would be willing to do that. But so he's ready to do that, and Lord Shiva saw, and he's like, God, okay, fine, I'll come. So he appears before him and says, I'll grant you a boon you want, whatever. And Vraja-mohana went all this austerity just so he could have the boon that whoever's head he touched would explode, the person would be destroyed. And so Lord Shiva is, okay, whatever, grants it to him. And then immediately Vraja-mohana tries to use that exact boon that he got from the person he's been worshipping on him. So he tried to test it on Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva realized, oh my God, what have I done? So he runs all over the universe, trying to escape Vraja-mohana. And he runs up to Lord Vishnu's abode, and we all know the rest of the story. So that's a perfect example of where the means of worship and the end of worship are very different. You know, he's worshiping Lord Shiva so intensely, you know, with so much apparent devotion, because of his very strong desire for his own ability, you know, his own mystic perfection. But then as soon as that worship is complete, he turns on the very person he's worshiping. So it's like a business deal, you know, business arrangement. And obviously it goes sour, but there's no actual devotion in that kind of situation. It's just like a you know, merchant. So this isn't what, as devotees, we want to emulate. We want ahoitukiya pratyata, the unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service, and yayatma suprasiddhiti, that will fully satisfy the self. Only that. Nothing, you know, not even devotional service for our own satisfaction, our own, you know, enjoyment. Even that won't satisfy us. It may seem like it in the beginning, but you know, as time goes by, it'll turn from nectar to poison. So we have to always keep that in mind, that all activities are done for Krishna's pleasure, and we should endeavor as much as possible to do them uninterrupted and without any material motivation. Sometimes it's misunderstood, that concept of no motivation. There's no material motivation, no motivation for myself. We can have all motivations for Krishna's pleasure, you know, many desires and many ways that we can please him. We should desire that, but not for my own satisfaction. So there's a nice mood that Prahlad Maharaj describes in the 7th canto, chapter 10. There's just a little paragraph in the summary of the chapter. Prabhupada writes about Prahlad's mood. It's like the mood of a devotee compared to the mood of a karmakandi. Lord Nrsimhadev wanted to bestow benedictions upon Prahlad Maharaj, one after another. But Prahlad Maharaj, thinking them impediments on the path of spiritual progress, did not accept any of them. Instead, he fully surrendered at the Lord's lotus feet. He said, if anyone engaged in the devotional service of the Lord prays for personal sense gratification, he cannot be called a pure devotee, or even a devotee. He may be called only a merchant engaged in the business of give and take. Similarly, a master who wants to please his servant after taking service from him is also not a real master. Prahlad Maharaj, therefore, did not ask anything from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, he said that if the Lord wanted to give him a benediction, he wanted the Lord to assure him that he would never be induced to take any benedictions for the sake of material desires. Exchanges of devotional service for lusty desires are always very prominent. As soon as lusty desires awaken, one's senses, mind, life, soul, religious principles, patience, intelligence, shyness, beauty, strength, memory, and truthfulness are all vanquished. One can render unalloyed devotional service only when there are no material desires in one's mind. So that helps put things in perspective, that we can if we have these, desires for self-enjoyment or puja, pratishtha, labha, worship, fame, adoration, all these things, then it destroys our religious, all these things, our religious principles, our patience, intelligence, shyness, beauty, strength, memory, truthfulness. All these things become compromised because instead of engaging everything in the service of Krishna, we start thinking about engaging everything in our own service. And it's it's a distorted reflection of what they're meant for. So therefore, if you're chasing after that, it's just like chasing after mirage. You're not going to reach the desired result, the desired goal. So, we ultimately want to have no material desire for our own self, but all spiritual desire for Krishna. And I was thinking, just like in, this idea that I'll worship, this demigod for this benefit, and this demigod for that benefit, and I'll worship, this demigod to counteract that sinful activity I did, and I'll perform this, vrata and this fast so I can, counteract this sin and that sin. It's like trying to, pull all these ropes to get your karmic balance, balanced perfectly so you can enjoy and not suffer. And it's always like an adjustment. They can never be peaceful. So Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Adeva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakale Shanta. Those desiring Bhukti Mukti Siddhi, they can never be peaceful. They can never be satisfied because they're always having to, adjust constantly. So it's just like a business agreement that you don't go into the MTA, subway system, and you go to the person at the, the booth, the counter, and you don't want to serve them. You don't want to have a relationship with them. Like, hey, what's your name? What can I do for you? How can I serve you? Unless you're really humble, pure devotee, you want to give them Krishna consciousness. That's the type of service. But generally, you don't, go there and want to know all about them and want to serve them and things like that. It's a completely business arrangement. You go to the window, you say, okay, here's $3, I want a ticket, and that's it. So, you're polite enough and you cooperate, and then as soon as the interaction is completed, you've got what you want, they got what they want, it's finished, So, bhakti is quite different. That, our sambandha is that, we're an eternal servant of Krishna. Our position is to render loving service. And our abhideya is by doing that service, by engaging in worshipping Radha and Krishna. And then our prayojan is to continue serving Radha and Krishna, but in a perfected form, in a spiritual form, and to understand them, their relationship and their activities perfectly, engage in them by helping, assist them. So, especially in Kali Yuga, it's described that the holy name is our abhideya. It is our means of engaging in devotional service. It's our sadhana, and it's our siddha, our prayojan, which means our ultimate goal. So by engaging in chanting the holy name, now it may be impure, but when we're chanting purely, we'll be doing the same thing, but just in a purified state. Just like it's discussed, the condensation of sugar, it starts off as, I forget all the stages, but it starts off as raw sugar, rock sugar or something, and then it becomes more condensed, more sweet, more sweet, more sweet, more sweet, until you finally get rock candy, very sweet and condensed.
So it's juice.
Juice starts as juice, and then it becomes more refined, more refined, more refined, more refined. Yeah.
You boil it.
It becomes crystals, and then it becomes, yeah. So we're not against refined sugar, but if it's got all this toxic stuff, yeah, we are. But so the holy name's just like that. The more we engage and we try and develop a relationship with the holy name, which is non-different than Krishna, and contains all of his potencies, all of his pastimes, all of his qualities, all of his different forms, the more we come to understand his sweetness. And then, when we get more invested, it becomes more sweet, and then more sweet, and more sweet, and more sweet, until finally we yeah, we're chanting the pure holy name, tasting pure sweetness. But the amazing thing is that it gets ever sweet, it never stops getting more sweet. It's not that we reach like perfect platform that, okay, now I've tasted the ultimate sweetness of Krishna's holy name, keeps going, increasing. It's the opposite of material happiness, always reaches that point where it's like, okay, now I'm perfectly satisfied, and then it just starts going down. As soon as you reach that point, there's always the fear, oh no, now, it's going to start coming down. And the other thing that's being discussed in this purport is that by serving Krishna, all other wants are automatically satisfied. So, we don't need to do a separate demigod puja, for this benefit, that benefit. But all penances, all sacrifice is achieved by worshipping Krishna. And we automatically fulfill all the material requirements of karma, living in this world, because it's, you're bound to commit some sin or some, impious karmic activities. Just walking, you step on ants, just breathing, you breathe in germs, you get a flu or a virus or something, your body has to kill the organisms in your body. And then what to speak of eating and that sort of thing. So it's inevitable that one has to accrue impious credits in living in the material world. But as devotees, the more that we engage everything in Krishna's service, and the more that we are fully Krishna conscious, to that extent we're free from our negative effects of karma. So I was just reading recently, where was that? I don't remember exactly where I was reading it. I think it was a purport in Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, but Prabhupada said actually this yukta vairagya is an advanced stage. Sometimes we can kind of take it cheaply, but it's actually a very advanced stage, because it means you have the consciousness that everything's Krishna's, and you're, engaging it in his service, which a lot of times it's hard to, it's not so easy to remember that, literally everything is Krishna's, not just this and that, and then that's like, kind of mine, but I know it's Krishna's, but I'm using it, but, so, yukta vairagya is actually quite an advanced understanding to have. But yeah, to the extent that we're more advanced, to that extent that we don't have to accrue these sinful activities. By being in connection with Krishna, also all these things are purified. And on this concept that's Prabhupada's bringing up in the purport of, it's not necessary to worship the demigods. It's not necessary to, you have to study all the Vedas and chant the Vedic hymns and all these things. It brings into memory pastimes of Srila Gaura Das Babaji, because Prabhupada says in a purport that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was such a great exalted personality, and Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, he was also so great that my Guru Maharaj was his disciple. He was the spiritual master of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was such a pundit, he just knew all these, so much of the Vedas, Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, all of these amazing literatures, very in detail. But Srila Gaura was so great that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to take initiation and shelter from him. And one time, I believe, a devotee asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that, your spiritual master is, he didn't know, Shastra, and, he wasn't like doing preaching, he was just living like an avadut. So like, what, I think something along the lines like, why did you, he was kind of alluding at that, why did you take initiation from him? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, yes, my Guru Maharaj, he's like the engine powering me. He's providing all of my spiritual strength. And he's empowering me to do what I'm doing. Without him, I can't do anything. So we don't, our understanding that, Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by worshipping him perfectly, by engaging in his service, all necessities of studying the Vedas, of performing different austerities, penances, yajnas, all these kinds of things are fulfilled automatically, and one is bestowed with bhakti shakti, pure devotional energy by which one can perfectly execute all material and spiritual duties. And I believe it's even said somewhere that devotees would, every now and then they would, ask Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj questions, and he knew the imports of Shastra, even though he was illiterate. He knew, he had understanding of the deep meanings of Krishna consciousness, of Krishna Bhakti, even though, he was not able to read or write. So, one who takes shelter of the holy name, it's described that, there's a nice verse. This is from Padyavali. Rupa Goswami writes that Rupa Goswami doesn't write it, but it's originally from Skanda Purana, but he brings it into his Padyavali. So he says, O Bhriguvara, Sri Krishna Nam is the sweetest of all sweet things, and the most auspicious of all that is auspicious. Bhagavan Sri Krishna's holy name is the fully ripened fruit of the flowering creeper of the Vedas, and the embodiment of divine knowledge. If someone chants Sri Krishna's holy name only once, be it with faith or contempt, he is immediately delivered from the ocean of birth and death. So this is, the holy name for us in Kali Yuga. The holy name is our bread and butter, you could say. It's our everything. It's the fully ripened fruit of the flourishing creeper of the Vedas. So it's the goal of our Vedic study. And another bhajan by Narottam Das Thakur, he says that all my penances and austerities, all these things, all my study of the Vedas is fulfilled by chanting the holy name. So, and the embodiment of divine knowledge. So sometimes we experience that when we're chanting japa, all of a sudden these, very profound realizations come. That even when we're reading the book, we're studying Bhagavad Gita, or studying Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, studying these books, we're reading it and it's just kind of like going in and like staying a little bit, going out. But then when chanting the holy name, the same thing comes back, but with realization of the knowledge. So it's very, anyone can read the literatures, transcendental literatures, and understand if Krishna gives realization. But sometimes it takes that key, to unlock the knowledge. So it's described, the holy name is the key that unlocks the nama, rupa, guna, lila. The holy name unlocks the other aspects of Krishna so we can understand. So, it's a very nice process that we've been given, very simple, but sometimes not very easy. So if we have any questions or comments, this would be a good time. Otherwise, we can end here.
Use that mic or the other one? This one's better. Okay. It's interesting that both of these verses are kind of about incarnations of the Lord that we don't hear usually much about.
Yeah.
And one other thing we don't usually hear about is how, the universe got populated. So, of course, the modern idea is the idea of Charles Darwin's evolution, but our version of it is quite different. That there's Brahma, who was the first being in the universe, and then he has 9 mind-born sons, sometimes called the Manasaputra. And besides them, there's 14 others which become the broad category called the Prajapatis. And from the Prajapatis, that's where all kinds of beings become generated in the earth, and for that matter, in all planets. So, that's why Manu, and then eventually we get Nabi, and then yesterday's verse talked about Rishabdev. And I just wanted to mention that Rishabdev, when he renounced the kingdom, and we read this morning before you started this verse that people spat on him and urinated on him and all this kind of thing because they misunderstood him. And then Prabhupada, in a later section in Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, describes that actually he had an admirer called Maharaj Arahat. It was this Maharaj Arahat who started the Jain religion.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading that.
He ascribed various kinds of things to Rishabdev and made as Prabhupada puts it, an impersonalistic religion based on the principles of Rishabdev. But he didn't actually follow what Rishabdev taught. Instead, there was this jnana yoga, which he was about, this sort of keeping very, very, doing austere, painful things to try to push oneself beyond the confines of the body. At least the ostensible idea there. But of course, doing devotional service is much more important than anything like that. And then on today's verse, when we're talking about Hayagriva, it's interesting how there is a demon Hayagriva and a personality of Godhead Hayagriva. And the personality of Godhead Hayagriva has a horse's head, and as we heard today, the Vedas come out of his nostrils. And he kills his, I think he actually kills the horse demon, or the other demon, the one that's called, the other Hayagriva, called Hayagriva. But as well, he kills Kaitava and Madhu, which is described later on in the 7th canto. And they also stole the Vedas. So this idea of stealing the Vedas
Happens many times, maybe.
Yeah. The Vedas sometimes are visible, and sometimes they're not visible. Sometimes they're known in the society, and sometimes they're unknown. We can see that even now, how many people in our everyday world have ever heard of the Vedas. Almost nobody has ever heard of them. And there'll come a time where essentially no one will have heard of the Vedas. When Brahma goes to sleep at the end of his day, in one place it was described that he kind of curls up around the Vedas. And that's when Madhu and Kaitava stole them, and they took them to Rasatala. And they were two very
Wow.
praying to Durga to get these various benedictions. And Brahma came to Vishnu and asked that somehow the Vedas be restored. So Vishnu fought with Madhu, and while he was fighting with Madhu, Kaitava was sleeping. And then Kaitava woke up and traded places, and Madhu slept. And so at each time one of them was sleeping, the other one was fighting with Vishnu. So at least the way the story goes is that Vishnu became very tired by fighting with both of them because it was only one of them, but there were two of them. So he went to, Vishnu went and discussed it with Durga Devi and said, how can we defeat this Madhu and Kaitava? And Durga Devi suggested that Vishnu use deceit. So Vishnu went to Madhu and Kaitava and said, I'm very pleased by your fighting. Please accept a boon from me. And Madhu and Kaitava laughed at Vishnu and said, accept a boon from you. We are superior to you. Why should we accept a boon? You should accept a boon from us. And so Vishnu said, very well then, I will accept a boon from you that I get to kill you. So I think that's an interesting story.
Yeah. Transcendental trickery. Yeah.
Sometimes you want to oh, this is Shiva, right? And sometimes we may get that like, Shiva, he's nobody, Shiva, great personality. All the demigods are, very elevated personalities. Therefore, the Vaishnavas are told to offer respects. So we're very respectful. We don't worship them. We don't surrender unto them. We offer respect to them.
Yeah. Greatest Vaishnava, Lord Shiva.
And then, of course, the other and the second thing, I was here in class this morning, Srila Prabhupada, and he gave a very interesting analogy with Hare Rama verse. So he was saying how you have the four yugas, and each respective yuga you have a certain way to achieve perfection. Satya yuga is through meditation, Treta yuga through fire sacrifice, Dwapara yuga through deity worship, and then Kali yuga through chanting all the names. So he's saying every time after he said Hare Rama, so he said Hare Rama, it's not through meditation. Hare Rama, it's not through fire sacrifice. Hare Rama, it's not through deity worship. It's not through deity worship. And like that, so it was a nice analogy Prabhupada was giving. Especially nowadays, we see so many people getting into meditation. The conception is I have to go to the forest. Kind of this a very long off shot off of what was done in Satya Yuga as far as I have to sit down and meditate and look at the nose and different things like this. So really present it to people. I know real meditations in this age is chanting all the names. Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
And just this point of, the purpose was mentioning about this demigod worship for material, for fulfilling material desires. So what would you recommend? What would you say to people that do have material desires? What should they do? What should be done for those type of people?
Give them up. No, yeah. I mean, because Prabhupada's described that if one does have a material desire, still they should worship Krishna, but they should understand like it's not a very nice thing, It's like going to the king, and asking for a handful of rice or something. He'll give you anything. He'll give you a kingdom. He'll give you a town. He can grant practically well, not any mortal desire, but to a pretty high level, he can grant your desires. And then you ask him, give me this very insignificant thing. So, and it kind of gets in the way of the relationship also. It becomes like a merchant, like a business deal. But yeah, if someone does have material desires, still they should approach Krishna and pray to him for that. And whether he fulfills it or not, that's up to him. But still we should try and dovetail it. But with the understanding, that really I should be giving this up. But then again, we could discuss, the level of material desires, because eating is a material desire, sleeping is a material desire. But as much as we can give up, that much it's good for our devotional service. But while we're in the conditioned stage, the sadhana stage, we also have to take our due lot, I guess you could say. We have to be practical and engage that which has been set aside for us. But more than that, that's when it starts hindering our advancement. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. To answer that question, what I noticed from my experience, when I see something, the question was how do you overcome the attachment to materialistic things? And from my perspective is, when I saw somebody driving a really nice car and I got really envy and jealous, I said to myself, I really don't like that feeling. So the only way for my mind to understand was to let go of the want, the attachment to that, because I didn't like that feeling. But by chanting Hare Krishna, I realized it sobered my heart and my mind to realize that's the real feeling, when I see those things, I shouldn't have any emotions towards it, because if I have emotions to something, then I'm attached to it, and that's because it really goes in deeper, because what I realized was I was always trying to control things that's out of my nature, such as possessing something that somebody else has. So when I let go of the envy and I first had to say, I didn't like this feeling. I didn't like feeling angry. I didn't like feeling jealous. I didn't like feeling like my heart was controlled by something that's exterior within myself. But then I searched deeper and I said, I need to go deeper into myself and define what the problem is. And I finally realized, I can control how I feel towards that object by chanting Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna, Krishna, Hare, Hare, Hare Ram, 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 Hare, Hare. Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, we have the responsibility of, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond, And by chanting, it purifies our consciousness so we can always respond, hopefully, perfectly.
I did have one. I wanted to put a postscript on what I said earlier, that it's always important to note that, if it appears Vishnu is having some difficulty in doing something, that, of course, he really doesn't have any difficulty, but he sometimes acts in a way as if it appears that he's having some difficulty, so that he can engage others, like in this case, Durga Devi or whatever. And what you were talking about, that this idea of trying to please the Supreme Lord without having any personal material desires, that is, of course, the standard of devotional service, but most of us don't start there. Most of us start with mixed devotional service. So we start with, as the verse goes in Bhagavatam, Akama, Sadhakama, Mokshakama, Udaradi, Tibrena Bhakti Yoga, Jeta Pura Shankaram, that even if one has Akama, no material desire, or Sarvakam, even as all material desires, still one should worship the Supreme. And that's of course where we get in Bhagavad Gita, the supratinas, for pious men that surrender. So it's beginning stages, so you have the arta, artarti, the jigasa, and the jnani. So the person who is either suffering or desiring some kind of material benediction, such people are considered supratinas. So it's certainly not pure devotion, but it's usually where people start. And that's even what we're doing for the most part. We are trying to please Krishna and trying to keep our own material desires out of the way as much as possible.
Grandra Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. I was like, where did that jai come from? So loud.